This week in Greater Brisbane, commuters faced another difficult week on the rail network. Hundreds of riders crossed the Story Bridge in protest against proposed new e-bike laws, and new recommendations were handed down. Also this week, federal government has scaled back inland rail, Olympic projects are moving ahead while facing growing environmental and heritage scrutiny, and the state government is backing a bold new tourism vision for the Brisbane River. And underneath all of that sits a bigger question. How does Greater Brisbane keep up with the pressures of rapid growth while still trying to build for the future at the same time? I'm Adam and this is the Brisbane Channel, where locals stay up to date with what's happening across Greater Brisbane without the spin. Let's get updated. We'll start with what has probably been the biggest story affecting daily life across Greater Brisbane this week, the ongoing Queensland Rail dispute. Queensland Rail's reduced timetable remained in place this week, with commuters continuing to face overcrowding, delays, and reduced frequencies across the network. The temporary timetable has reduced services to around 80% of normal capacity, with some peak hour wait times blowing out from around 6 minutes to 15 minutes on major lines. Queensland Rail says the disruptions are tied to industrial action affecting maintenance work, with fewer trains available due to delayed repairs and servicing. The unions, however, argue the government and Queensland Rail have unnecessarily escalated the situation by refusing to allow partial duties to continue. And importantly, a Fair Work Commission ruling related to earlier shutdowns found that some of the disruption was of Queensland Rail's own making, because management refused to accept partial work arrangements. That ruling has become a major point in the ongoing political and industrial dispute. This week, both sides spent a considerable amount of time in mediation talks at the Fair Work Commission, but no agreement was reached. Earlier in the week, union representatives warned the dispute could potentially drag on for an extended period if negotiations continued to stall, drawing comparisons to the lengthy rail dispute seen in New South Wales in 2023. But by Friday evening, both Queensland Rail and union reps were speaking in slightly more optimistic terms after another marathon session at the Fair Work Commission. While industrial action is still continuing for now, both sides described Friday's discussions as productive, with negotiations set to resume this coming week. Queensland Rail says it remains frustrated industrial action has not yet paused, while unions say they finally feel negotiations are moving toward an actual resolution. So at this stage, commuters remain caught in the middle of a dispute that still isn't resolved, but there may finally be some signs of movement. I can bring you updates like this thanks to local businesses who sponsor the Brisbane Channel, and one of them is Excel Psychology. If you need support with things like anxiety, depression, managing ADHD, or relationship challenges, you should consider contacting Excel. They're a warm and inclusive psychology practice based in Spring Hill, just a short walk from Central Station. They've got a diverse team of clinical and registered psychologists, and they focus on matching you with the right person for your needs, often with relatively short wait times. They also offer Medicare rebates with a mental health treatment plan and support for work cover and NDIS participants. If you'd like to find out more, you can scan the QR code on screen or check out the link in the description. Meanwhile, another major transport debate has been building this week, this time around Queensland's proposed new e-bike and e-scooter laws. More than 100 riders crossed the Story Bridge on Thursday evening in protest against the proposed laws, arguing the changes could make active transport significantly less practical for many people. The proposed legislation would require a driver's license for legal pedal-assisted e-bikes, ban under-16s from riding them, and impose a 10 km/h speed limit on footpaths and shared paths. The protest organisers said the Story Bridge route was deliberately chosen to highlight what they see as an impossible choice created by the proposed laws: either ride at jogging pace on shared paths or mix with high-speed traffic on the road. The government says the laws are aimed at improving safety following growing concerns around dangerous e-mobility behaviour and illegal high-powered devices, but critics argue the proposed restrictions may unintentionally affect ordinary riders using legal bikes and scooters responsibly. One major concern raised this week was that wording in the bill could potentially make many existing legal e-bikes technically non-compliant. There were also concerns raised around accessibility, with critics arguing some people who cannot drive due to disability, age, or medical conditions could lose an important form of mobility. And the debate has now expanded well beyond cycling groups. Tourism operators, food delivery companies, and major scooter hire companies have all warned the laws could create practical and economic problems if implemented in their current form. At the same time, pedestrian safety concerns remain a major issue in the debate, particularly around busy shared paths and footpaths. So this is increasingly becoming a broader conversation about how Brisbane balances safety, accessibility, and active transport in a rapidly growing city. And there may already be signs the government could soften parts of the proposal. A parliamentary committee this week recommended several changes, including limiting 10km/h speed limits to high pedestrian areas only, allowing exemptions in low-risk areas, and creating carve-outs for people unable to hold a driver's license. The committee suggested a possible 15km/h limit on shared paths, and only when a cyclist or scooter comes within 10 metres of a pedestrian. So while the government's broader crackdown appears likely to proceed in some form, the final laws may end up looking quite different from the original proposal. And actually, this is something I dug into in much more detail in the latest episode of the Brisbane Channel podcast with Bicycle Queensland CEO Matt Burke, because there are some really important questions here around transport planning, safety, and the future of active transport in Brisbane. I'll put a link to the video in the description and at the end of this video. While all of that has been happening, housing pressures across Southeast Queensland also remain firmly in focus. But before I get to that, I'll just let you know that this video is not as exhaustive as usual, but on Wednesday evening I'll be doing a live stream where I cover all the stories from the past week that didn't make it into this video. That includes an update on a highly anticipated project on the north side that many people have been asking about, some pretty cool innovations coming out of Brisbane, and details of a major blunder connected to Bluey. So keep your calendar clear on Wednesday night. It'd be great to see you in the live chat. But back to housing pressures. New analysis released this week by one major property group suggested investor activity across parts of Southeast Queensland may be slowing, with the company linking the decline to higher interest rates and speculation around possible future changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax settings. The argument from the property industry is that fewer investors could worsen rental shortages by reducing the number of rental properties entering the market. But others argue strong investor activity can also push purchase prices higher and make home ownership harder for first home buyers. And that's an important reminder that housing affordability debates aren't usually straightforward, because what helps one group in the housing market can tend to create pressure somewhere else. But one thing almost everyone seems to agree on is that Southeast Queensland continues to face major supply pressures as the population grows. And part of that challenge is workforce capacity. This week, the state and federal governments announced a new $73.8 million construction tech TAFE Centre of Excellence aimed at training more construction workers for housing and infrastructure projects across Queensland. The initiative will include new facilities at future TAFE campuses in Moreton Bay and Caloundra, with a focus on construction technology, simulated work sites, and faster pathways into the industry. The governments say the program is designed to help meet growing demand tied to housing delivery, major infrastructure, and the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. So increasingly, the challenge for Queensland is not just funding projects, but actually having enough workers available to build them. And if you need highly skilled workers to do some painting work at your home or business, I highly recommend you get in touch with channel sponsor YB Painting. They recently picked up 2 first and 3 second place awards at the Master Painters Australia Queensland Awards for 2025, which gives you an idea of the standard they're working at. They offer fixed pricing and a 5-year warranty on their work, so you know exactly what you're getting up front. You can claim an exclusive 10% discount by scanning the QR code on screen or through the link in the description. In the last week, we also saw one of Australia's biggest infrastructure projects dramatically scaled back. The federal government announced that the Inland Rail from Melbourne will now stop at Parkes in central New South Wales rather than continuing through to Brisbane as originally planned. That decision could have major long-term implications for freight movement, regional development, and future rail connectivity into Southeast Queensland. The decision followed another major cost escalation, with estimates for the project rising from around $16 billion several years ago to more than $45 billion. Supporters of Inland Rail argue the project would have improved freight efficiency, reduced truck traffic, supported regional growth, and strengthened fuel and supply chain resilience. Critics, however, have long raised concerns around routing decisions, floodplain issues, land acquisition, and project governance. And there's now significant backlash from regional Queensland communities and industry groups who argue they've already lived through years of disruption for a project that may never fully deliver its promised benefits. The decision could also affect future freight and passenger rail ambitions linked to Toowoomba and Wellcamp. So this is now becoming a much broader debate around how Australia delivers major nation-building infrastructure projects and whether governments can realistically maintain long-term political and financial support for projects of this scale. Now let's shift to Brisbane 2032 because there were several major developments this week across multiple Olympic projects. The biggest update came at Victoria Park, where the federal government ruled the proposed Olympic Stadium and National Aquatic Centre were not controlled actions under federal environmental law. That means the projects will not require further federal environmental assessment, clearing a major hurdle for the government's planned timeline. At the same time, new renders and master plan details for the Victoria Park precinct were released this week. The government says around 2/3 of Victoria Park will remain open green space after construction, including Yorks Hollow, while new wetlands areas, walking spaces and public recreation zones are planned around the stadium precinct. The proposed Olympic warm-up track location was also revealed. But despite the environmental approval, the project still faces ongoing opposition and scrutiny. Several Indigenous heritage protection applications remain active, with opponents arguing the site has significant cultural and ancestral importance. There are also continuing concerns around environmental impacts, underground springs, public green space, and long-term connectivity into the precinct. And interestingly, some critics have pointed out the latest renders still leave open major questions around transport access and how large crowds will move through the area. So while the Victoria Park project is clearly moving ahead, the broader debate around the long-term impact on Brisbane is definitely far from over. At the same time, another Olympic venue is now facing increased environmental scrutiny. The federal government has delayed its decision on the proposed Redland Whitewater Centre at Birkdale while it considers whether the project requires a full environmental impact assessment. Community and environmental groups have raised concerns around koala habitat, groundwater impacts, wetlands and wildlife corridors. Redland City Council, however, says the project is backed by years of ecological studies and argues the site will ultimately end up in better environmental condition than it is today. So this week's updates highlight the challenges of delivering major Olympic infrastructure while also managing environmental, cultural and community concerns. And alongside the sporting infrastructure, the government is also trying to reshape Brisbane's tourism identity ahead of the Games. This week, the state government announced $2.1 million in backing for the proposed Brisbane River Icons project. The proposal includes a wheelchair-accessible flying fox between Kangaroo Point and the City Botanic Gardens, suspended picnic experiences, accessible river boats, and upgraded river infrastructure. Supporters say the project could help position Brisbane as a more globally recognisable tourism destination ahead of 2032, while also expanding accessible adventure tourism. Critics, however, argue the funding raises broader questions about priorities, while Brisbane still faces major unresolved infrastructure issues like the long-term restoration of the Story Bridge. It's important to point out, though, that this is still a proposed project requiring approvals, not a confirmed final development at this stage. I'm in the process of arranging a chat with the man behind the project, who is also responsible for the creation of the Story Bridge Adventure Climb, the world's first accessible bridge climb, for one of the channel's upcoming podcasts, so make sure you're subscribed and keep your eye out for that one. Another thing to be aware of ahead of time is the World Press Photo Exhibition, which opens at the Powerhouse on the 30th of May, bringing some of the world's most significant photojournalism to the city. If you appreciate all the work I put into bringing you the videos and podcasts on this channel, I'd really appreciate any support you can give through Buy Me a Coffee, or you can join the community of supporters that are members of the channel, which gets you extra content such as extended podcasts and some behind-the-scenes updates. Your support is much appreciated. And politically, attention has been turning toward the upcoming Stafford by-election. While the seat itself won't change the balance of government, the campaign has increasingly become a reflection of the broader pressures facing Brisbane right now: cost of living, housing, transport, infrastructure, and growth. And honestly, that broader theme probably ties together almost every major story this week. Because whether we're talking about transport, housing, tourism, freight, or Olympic infrastructure, Queensland increasingly seems to be wrestling with the consequences of rapid growth and trying to work out how to build for the future while managing the pressures of the present. Don't forget about the live stream on Wednesday at 7 p.m. so you can stay completely in the loop with everything that wasn't in this video. Here's the latest podcast I mentioned for you to check out, and I'm done.